Good morning. I thought I would just make a tiny contribution for now from The Hidden Life of Trees by Peter Wohlleben. And we're on the third chapter, and that is called Social Security. Let's go. Gardeners often ask me if their trees are growing too close together. Won't they deprive each other of light and water? This concern comes from the forestry industry. In commercial forests, trees are supposed to grow thick trunks and be harvest ready as quick as possible. And to do that, they need a lot of space and large symmetrical rounded crowns. In regular 5-year cycles, any supposed competition is cut down so that the remaining trees are free to grow. Because these trees will never grow old, they are destined for the sawmill when they are only about 100. The negative effects of this management practice are barely noticeable. What negative effects? Doesn't it sound logical that a tree will grow better if bothersome competitors are removed, so that there is plenty of sunlight available for its crown and plenty of water for its roots? And for trees belonging to different species, that is indeed the case. They really do struggle with each other for local resources, but it's different for the trees of the same species. I've already mentioned that beeches are capable of friendship and go so far as to feed one another. It is obviously not in a forest's best interest to lose its weaker members. If that were to happen, it would leave gaps that would disrupt the forest's sensitive microclimate with its dim light and high humidity. If it weren't for the gap issue, every tree could develop freely and lead its own life. I say could because beeches at least seem to set a great deal of store by sharing resources. I'm going to read that part again. If it weren't for the gap issue, every tree could develop freely and lead its own life. I say could because beeches at least seem to get a great deal of store by sharing resources. Students at the Institute for Environmental Research at Aachen discovered something amazing about photosynthesis in undisturbed beech forests. Apparently the trees synchronize their performance so that they are all equally successful. And that is not what one would expect. Each beech tree grows in a unique location and conditions can vary greatly in just a few yards. The soil can be stony or loose. It can retain a great deal of water or almost no water. It can be full of nutrients or extremely barren. Accordingly, each tree experiences different growing conditions. Therefore, each tree grows more quickly or more slowly and produces more or less sugar or wood, and thus you would expect every tree to be photosynthesizing at a different rate. And that's what makes the research results so astounding. The rate of photosynthesis is the same time for all the trees. The trees, it seems, are equalizing differences between the strong and the weak. Whether they are thick or thin, all members of the same species are using light to produce the same amount of sugar per leaf. This equalization is taking place underground through the roots. There's obviously a lively exchange going on down there. Whoever has an abundance of sugar hands some over. Whoever is running short gets help. Once again, fungi are involved. Their enormous networks act as a gigantic redistribution mechanism. But it's like the way the social security systems operate to ensure individual members of society don't fall too far behind. In such a system, it is not possible for the trees to grow too close together. Quite the opposite. Huddling together is desirable, and the trunks are often spaced no more than 3 feet apart. Because of this, the crowns remain small and cramped, and even many foresters believe this is not good for trees. Therefore, the trees are spaced out through felling, meaning that supposedly excess trees are removed. However, colleagues from Lübeck in northern Germany have discovered that a beech forest is more productive when the trees are packed together. A clear annual increase in biomass above all wood is proof of the health of the forest throng. When trees grow together, nutrients and water can be optimally divided among them so that each tree can grow into the best tree it can be. If you help individual trees by getting rid of their supposed competition, the remaining trees are bereft. They send messages out to their neighbors in vain because nothing remains but stumps. Every tree now muddles along its own, giving rise to great differences in productivity. Some individuals photosynthesize like mad until sugar positively bubbles along their trunk. That's what it is! Yes, answers. Love it. As a result, they are fit and grow better, but they aren't particularly long-lived. This is because a tree can only be as strong as the forest that surrounds it. The tree can only be as strong as the forest that surrounds it. And there are now a lot of losers in the forest. Weaker members who would once have been supported by the stronger ones suddenly fall behind. Whether the reason for their decline is their location and lack of nutrients, a passing malaise, or genetic makeup, they now fall prey to insects and fungi. But isn't that how evolution works, you ask? The survival of the fittest? Trees would just shake their heads, or rather their crowns. Their well-being depends on their community. And when the supposedly feeble trees disappear, the others lose as well. Oh, that is so important to understand. When that happens, the forest is no longer a single closed unit. Hot sun and swirling winds can now penetrate to the forest floor and disrupt the moist, cool climate. When this happens, they depend on their weaker neighbors for support. That's something that is not like in this world. I'm talking about people, but I'm talking about trees. But if they are no longer there, then all it takes is what would once have been a harmless insect attack to seal the fate of even of giants. In former times, I myself instigated an exceptional case of assistance. In my first years as a forester, I had young trees girdled. In this process, a strip of bark 3 feet wide is removed all around the trunk to kill the tree. Basically, this is a method of thinning, where trees are not cut down, but desiccated trunks remain as standing deadwood in the forest. Even though the trees are still standing, they make more room for living trees because their leafless crowns allow a great deal of light to reach their neighbors. Do you think this method sounds brutal? I think it does, because death comes slowly over a few years, and therefore in the future I wouldn't manage forests this way. I observed how hard the beeches fought, and amazingly enough, how some of them survived to this day. Kudos to all the survivors out there. In the normal course of events, such survival would not be possible, because without bark, the tree cannot transport sugar from its leaves to its roots. As the roots starve, they shut down their pumping mechanisms, and because water no longer flows through the trunk up to the crown, the whole tree dries out. This is complex, but simply put, this is what happens to a human as well, in a way. Because, like as it says here, so as the roots starve, they shut down their pumping mechanisms. So as the body starves, and if it's to a point, to an extreme point, I'm not suggesting starving in any type of way. It's horrific, and it's sickening, it's deadening, and it's exactly what's described here. But things start not working so well, and the communication between your cells aren't working well. Cells are dying, even your brain cells die. I got brain damage from starving myself in the midst of anorexia, which is horrific, a really terrible, what do I call it? I mean, nowadays you can't really call it a disorder, but although it causes a lot of disorder, but yeah, it's anyway, but I mean, it's true, and because water or blood, or basically oxygen, anything that your body needs to flow, like from the body to the brain and to the various organs, to like your extremities, and as that slows down and the flow slows, and the blood can't get everywhere, and you're in survival mode or starvation mode, and so your body's doing what it can to survive. So it's changing, it's adapting, it is almost as if it does everything it can, even if it has to sort of sacrifice parts of you to just try to conserve itself as much as it can. But let's say in the case of anorexia, that doesn't stop without an intervention, without you can die from it, either by suicide or your body literally shutting down. You die. It's the most deadly it's a killer. It sets out to kill you. Anyway, yeah, much more research needs to be done. I find it interesting how there's funding for so many things, but to get funding for research for not only anorexia but eating disorders seems to be a sticky process and difficult, and I'd be interested to know some details there, as if I'll actually find those out. But yeah, I mean, kudos to the people that have managed to make advancements in research of anorexia and eating disorders, and who do webinars and educate and do lectures and report their research and try and collaborate with other researchers and scientists and psychiatrists, psychologists, nurses, just dietitians, everything, because they see the issue. They see that it is not a tiny handful of people this affects. It's global. I mean, eating disorders don't discriminate. Like I could definitely say that for anorexia, it's and so, like, I don't even know the numbers now, but all around the world, people are affected. I mean, we talk about different crises, and yet one of the deadliest forms of what can I say, psychiatric illness or mental illness, or you know, they're saying it's actually a brain disorder. But whatever it may be, it affects the brain, the body, the world, everything. And how weird is that it is. There are so many people all around the world in different places with different circumstances, different environments, different ways that they grew up. Yet, you know, I don't want to call it a phenomenon, but it is kind of like mind-boggling as to why and how and things like that, and why it's not being addressed. I mean, it is to a small degree, but it's kind of been, you know, getting less attention than so many other things, which is sad because people die. More people die. But I don't want to rattle off statistics, especially since I'm in South Africa, because, you know, I think that if I were to do that, the only statistics I sort of know from the USA, so it's like, I kind of want to know on a global scale, but like, yeah, just go into those videos, get yourself educated, understand. Maybe you can be a part of the solution. Maybe you can help someone around you. I'm telling you now, at least 1 in 5, or if you want to feel better about yourself, 1 in 2, 3, maybe in 10 will have an eating disorder. But yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, I mean, yeah, and it's a struggle. It's a struggle. If you recover, or you are able to get help and therefore enter a sort of recovery process, and this isn't exactly the same as like addictions, for example. It's not the same, but it's interesting from certain things that I've heard. There's some overlaps, and I find that interesting. I actually want to go deeper into that. I want to understand what overlaps and where and why, because I feel like that could possibly give way to like another pointed question, which could develop into an insight, which can then be delved deeper into or opened up, and more understanding can be gained. And that can be on like a one person level or two people. It takes two to have a conversation like that, crossing over and trying to find the through line. And then, you know, starting from one conversation, that can then branch out to a couple more conversations. And I think that just like many other things, many other crises, to address it, it takes participation and involvement from kind of, it doesn't matter who you are, you're not exempt from participating and trying to help change, help support, help make life better, help save lives, help yourself to know what to do, help solve things. It's like, you know, sometimes I think, you know, we talk about this meaning crisis, and there's all these things that fall under it, or mental health crisis, or name your crisis. But let's say one of the umbrella crisis titles. And I find it weird how eating disorders are left out. They're just left out. They're not really mentioned. I think that's a fundamental flaw, actually, because yeah, and a lot of people with eating disorders have like a dual diagnosis. They have some other disorder, maybe coupling with it, or some other issue, and so it itself even overlaps with other things that are under this umbrella of the meaning crisis or the blah 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 crisis. In any case, it itself can be a crisis. In fact, it probably is. Somebody's probably coined that. But yeah, but without having to talk about crisis, it's a big thing. It's a problem that needs attention, whether it's from a problem solver or someone who's got a solution that needs to ultimately start sharing that, or from people with wisdom who have survived, need to start speaking out. You need to get involved more. Support systems need to start coming up so that more voices can start to feel like they can have a sound. And yeah, because anorexia, it has this element where it silences you, and there's an element of it which is extremely difficult to explain to others in the way that they'll understand. So like sometimes I'll give it like a clause like, I understand that there are parts of this you won't understand, and neither do I, but through communication at least someone can get a gist. Anyway, so with anorexia there's like this I think it's a certain part of the brain, maybe I don't know which part, let's call it the ana brain, the anorexic brain, that at a certain point, I think if you cross your threshold, or you reach your threshold, things start to change, and that anorexic brain starts to become more dominant. And people can describe it as like a voice in their head. But to me, I understand what they're saying. Of course I do, because you are able to understand certain things that that now dominant part is saying. It's almost like it takes control, and it asserts control. But there's so much about it, though. It is, and I think where it differs from addiction is that maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should have a conversation with Chad. If my prayers get answered. Many of them do, but sometimes some of them take time, because then I can sort of speak properly, I think, and I don't want to sort of assume and say the wrong thing. But yeah, what I'm saying, there's overlap there, and I don't know why I'm talking about this. I suppose it's on my mind, and like, it's a struggle. It's like, for me, I'll tell you, it's something that's hard to wrap my mind around, but I'm like, bless these people. People that they get help early, they have support around them, the intervention is early, and their eating disorder is detected early, and they get treatment quickly and efficiently, and then they're basically recovered, and maybe that's for a year. Not the recovery, that process, that whole process could be maybe over a whole year. And then from then on, there are lots of people like this. From then on, they're just recovered. They and they're fine. And they don't die, they don't, but the longer you have had it, it's harder to like recover from. It is, I mean, something that's often said is that anorexia is sometimes compared to cancer. Okay. Which is touchy for me, but yet I understand it. It's not hard to understand. Anyway, so then what recovery is rather than referred to is remission, which fits a little bit better. However, it is part of your, like, in my life, it is part of every day. It takes work against it. I deal with it every day. And I have to. And there are certain consequences that I would have to deal with. And if I don't deal with them, that just brings me, it's like that part of the brain sees that opportunity, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna slowly start to take over now. And then before I am even aware of it, things start happening, my heart is beating fast, and that brings you closer and closer to relapse, as in relapse back into the claws of anorexia. So, and it's not like a drug. I've heard addiction being described, there's so many different descriptions, so it's like, I want to hear people's personal stories rather than like one sentence description. But for example, I heard, I don't know, I'm purposely forgetting the name of the person who said it, but that addiction was something to do with not being able to live without the thing that you're addicted to. Like, I didn't say that well, but that's fine, because I'm not like direct quoting or anything like that, but it was something like that. It's like, I feel my mind strain. And the thing is, I think that's got a depth to it that like isn't true, and parts to it that is true, or it's changeable at least. But I don't know, I almost have this, like, in my mind, it's like there's a return constantly to that which, let's say, you're or a person is addicted to. Like, they need it, like they just can't do without it for whatever reasons that are going on in their life. I think that perhaps it is sometimes something that like in certain instances helps a person survive, but then that's not really it. It's deeper. And though anorexia, for example, that's not something you want to go back to. It's like, it's not something that you go to in order to, I don't know, it's almost like there isn't a choice, it takes over you. And and it's dangerous, and it's terrifying. It's terrifying. And bless you if you don't know what I'm talking about it, and don't go there. Not that you have that control anyway, but I'm just saying, it's like people underestimate the seriousness of, to be inclusive eating disorders, but from what I can say, like people underestimate, and they're undereducated, and they struggle to understand. The thing is, like, drop that understanding, try to educate yourself, try and be there for that person, try and ask direct questions like, when last have you eaten today? You're like, and be direct, and not lie and make weird twisted comments on the person, but talk to them normally, and don't be awkward. They're people with eating disorders, and that includes anorexia. They are people. Maybe when they're in the grips of the struggle, they might not seem like much of a person anymore, but that is because the life is getting sucked out of them, and they're still there. So appeal to that person, help bring that person out. And okay, so my recorder cut me off there, even though I was finished rambling. But that wasn't too heavy, I don't think. So I'm just gonna try and finish up the chapter. In the normal course of events, such survival would not be possible because without bark, the tree cannot transport sugar from its leaves to its roots. As the roots starve, they shut down their pumping mechanisms, and because water no longer flows through the trunk up to the crown, the whole tree dries out. However, many of the trees I girdled continue to grow with more or less vigor. I know that this was only possible with the help of intact neighboring trees. Thanks to the underground network, neighbors took over the disrupted task of provisioning the roots and thus made it possible for their buddies to survive. Some trees even managed to bridge the gap in their bark with new growth. And I'll admit it, I'm always a bit ashamed when I see what I wrought back then. Nevertheless, I've learned from this and just how powerful a community of trees can be. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Trees have come up with this old craftsperson saying, and because they know this intuitively, they do not hesitate to help each other out. Okay, so that is the end of that chapter. And chapter 4, which is coming soon, its heading is love. And I just love that. So, yeah, my phone is running out of space, and I think that I should put something warm on. I feel the coldness creeping in. Yeah, if you watched this far and you don't find this horrifically boring, why don't you post a little feedback? Let me know what I can do better, and any tips for how I read, or the pace, or anything, any feedback. I'd really appreciate it. Even if it's, Dali, please, I request for you to do this, or here's a different idea, this is not working, or blah blah blah. But anyway, for me at least, this, I feel like, is something that I'm doing that is helpful, and possibly healing, and it's I believe that it's something good. At least I have good intentions, and yeah, with everything that I'm busy going through, this is, I don't know, this seems to be something that's providing a contrast. And sometimes when a contrast is created, you feel less like you're suffocating and like you can actually breathe a little bit. Anyway, sending love to you. Happy Sunday. Go to church.